Good afternoon. Let me welcome you to our January 28th Sunday School lesson. First of all, let me kind of apologize. We were not able to do this last week because of some construction we had going on here at the church. But that lesson was a kind of a special focus on sanctity of life. So it really does not fit into the series of lessons that we began 2 weeks ago, which is titled Owning a Faith That Matters. And all of these lessons will be from the book of Luke. We mentioned something I didn't know. I didn't realize Luke was the longest book in the New Testament. So it's, but we'll not be covering every bit of it. There'll be some different from different chapters. The first session was a life-changing faith, and particularly we talked there about what size of faith, and just a faith of a mustard seed, you can move mountains. Today we go to the second lesson. It's called Yielded Faith, and again it'll be in Luke chapter 7 of Luke, and the point of this lesson is that faith acknowledges the authority of Jesus, and that's an important part. Faith, we have to have. We need a life-changing faith. That faith has to acknowledge the authority of Jesus, or it will not be functioning. I particularly like the little story there on page 105. It talked about, says one thing about authority: the strongest police officer cannot literally stop a car, but with one hand, put up his hand, and he or she will command the brakes for the citizen to brake a vehicle. Why is that? It's because we yield to authority, and why do we yield to authority? Well, in case of a police officer, and that really kind of struck me because it took me a long time to get home last night because of a couple of trucks that were turned over, one up here on 140 and one on I-55, and each place they had police officers directing traffic. So why do we obey these police officers? Well, we're certainly, if we run through it, we're probably going to be something bad happen. We'll have the consequences. In addition, we should have respect for officers and other people, that we will respect them and therefore obey order, laws, and also protect ourselves. So this is the reason why we respect that authority, but to a much larger degree, shouldn't we be respecting the authority of Jesus and trusting Him? And certainly it goes beyond our respect for police officers, not to belittle that, but I think sometimes we do not. It's not on our radar, the authority that Jesus has, and we'll talk about that more through this session. Well, this session is from some very familiar scriptures. It's the healing of the centurion servant. A parallel account of this is found over in Matthew chapter 8, and I will refer to it a couple of times. There's also a similar story in John chapter 4, verses 46 through 53, but because of some of the details are different, the writer here suggests that's probably not the same healing event. It's one that's similar but not the same. Well, this story is one of the several stories that Luke provides that provides evidence of who Jesus is. And that's the good news. That's the purpose of the gospel, is to tell us who Jesus is and to provide us a way to show us the way to come to Him. Then by what right the question is, by what right does Jesus have to command us to follow Him? And that comes that He's clearly a man of authority. That's the reason we are to do the things that He tells us to do, and to follow Him just as in kind of the same nature that the centurion suggested. So let's look at this. Beginning let's be in verses 1 through 10 of chapter 7 of Luke. It said, verse 1, when he had concluded saying all this to the people who were listening, he entered Capernaum. Now, what he complete. If you look back chapter 6, it's really it's the same wordage that comes from the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapters 5 and 6. So I picture this. He concluded his teaching with the Sermon on the Mount, and then he entered Capernaum. Capernaum is it's situated on the northwest shore of the Sea of Galilee. It's a short distance from the Jordan River. It's curious that it is named in biblical accounts only in the Gospels. Paul doesn't refer to Capernaum in his, and it's not referred to in the Old Testament, which kind of suggests that perhaps that the city changed names, or somehow for some reason may have disappeared. The city was located on a major east-west trade route and became a customs station located there for military installations, whose major role was to support and protect the tax collectors. And so Capernaum became Jesus' adopted home and base of operation. Several of the 12 disciples called Capernaum as their home, particularly Peter, Andrew, and Matthew, and possibly James and John. So he enters Capernaum. Then verse 2 says, a centurion's servant who was highly valued by him was sick and about to die. When the centurion heard about Jesus, he sent some Jewish elders to him, requesting him to come and save the life of his servant. Now, this verse is a little bit in contrast. In Matthew's account, it says the centurion went to him. But if the centurion sent a servant or sent someone to see Jesus, or he went himself, it's basically the same. Verse 4, when they reached Jesus, they pleaded with him earnestly, saying, he is worthy for you to grant this, because he loves our nation and has built a synagogue. We're not told how long Jesus was in Capernaum, but this certain centurion sent people to him. Centurion, it's curious that anytime you see a centurion mentioned in the New Testament, it's in a positive light. A centurion was a Roman soldier that was assigned to about 100 soldiers. So be kind of equivalent to our captain in our U.S. Military. That he was these were career military men and were really the backbone of the Roman forces. He would have probably been a Gentile and ethnically a Gentile, and yet there was very little animosity between the Jews and the centurions. The centurion has a servant who was sick and about to die. Now the servant, literally the word be translated as slave. And one writer indicated that 1 of 5 people, or that is 20% of the people in that area were slaves at that time. Slaves are some form of a servant that would have been perhaps indentured servant. So, this idea of a servant sick and about to die probably for most people wouldn't have been thought of as a big deal. They were property. So if one died, they would just replace them. But this one was sick and about to die. In the Matthew account, it says that he was paralyzed and in terrible agony. So this centurion was very concerned about this servant. And that certainly tells you something about this particular centurion. For him to have this genuine concern for someone that, for many people would have considered just to be property. But this servant, it says that he was highly valued. So the centurion hears about Jesus, and you have to consider what was his perspective of Jesus at this time. He's certainly not a follower of Jesus. He hears about Jesus. He hears that Jesus has healed people. He hears, that he sees him as an asset. So he sends Jewish elders to him. Now, it's curious. Why does he send Jewish elders? Well, we get to it in verse 7. It clearly tells why he did this, is because he himself did not feel worthy. And again, we see very much of the character of this centurion. He sends Jewish elders, initially he sends Jewish elders to him, which would have denoted some of the Jewish community leaders. Perhaps he sent them because he thought, Jesus is a Jewish person. Maybe these people would have greater influence with him. So he sends these elders to him requesting Jesus to come and save the life of his servant. Now, interesting, what is he doing? Does he command Jesus to come? No. He says he requests him to come. He asks him, he beseeches him, he begs him to come to take care of this matter. It could have been, he could have easily commanded. He had that kind of authority in that country to have anybody come to him. But no, he requests. He tells them to go request Jesus to come. They reached Jesus. They pleaded with him earnestly. And again, I think this is very interesting. These Jewish leaders weren't just operating out of because this guy asked them to do it. They had some vested interest in this situation. And I suspect much of their vested interest was because they had a high regard for this centurion. So they came to him and pleaded earnestly. That it could be rendered diligently or sincerely. So this picture is not a picture of men acting as ordered or out of some obligation, but they are coming there with sincerity and purpose, asking Jesus to go. Now, and the reason they says, for he is worthy for you to grant this. Who is worthy? That is not the servant. It's the centurion is worthy, or it's he deserves. And they cite two reasons. And the word here, worthy, means having weight or value. He says the two reasons. One, because he loves our country. That's indicating that referring to Israel, this centurion had a great respect for the nation of Israel. And secondly, he has built us a synagogue. Now, whether he did it himself or fully financed or was just a major contributor, either way, they felt indebted to him or very appreciative of him for doing this. I thought it was interesting on page 107, it makes a comment there. It says, faith in Jesus cannot be based on our worthiness, efforts, or achievements. Otherwise, it wouldn't be faith. No matter what our position or past may be, we can approach Jesus and he is enough to carry us. I thought that was a very good point. To some extent, these Jewish leaders perhaps was coming to saying, he deserves it. He is worthy. He deserves it because he's done these good things to us. You should go and do something for him. And what it's saying here, and what certainly is true, faith in Jesus can't be based on worthiness. Jesus was not going to go to him because he deserved it. He was going to go to him because of love. And then over on the right column it says the Jewish mindset was be good. The Jesus mindset was and is be God's. And there's a big difference in being good and being God's. Interesting, very interesting dynamic we see in these verses. We've got a Gentile centurion. We have Jewish community leaders. We have Jesus, and we have a slave or a servant. What a contrast of the different type of cultures that was existing at that time. And I think it's a real point that Jesus goes across all cultures. He relates to the centurion, the Gentile. He relates to the Jewish community leaders, although they didn't relate to him very well, as we know. He relates to the slave, the one that's totally undeserving from man's standpoint. We're very, very fortunate that Jesus takes over those different cultures because sees over those different cultures because he, as a result of that, he relates to us. Well, verse 6, Jesus went with them, it's curious. He didn't ask any questions, or there's no record that says, he didn't say, who is this centurion? What, I don't know him. How far is it away? Where we go? There's no questions. He simply said, Jesus went with them. And when he was not far from the house, the centurion sent friends to tell him, Lord, don't trouble yourself, since I am not worthy to have you come under my roof. That is why I didn't even consider myself worthy to come to you, but say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I too am a man placed under authority, having soldiers under my command. I say to this one, go, and he goes, and to another one, come, and he comes, and to my servant, do this, and he does this. Well, Jesus does not record Luke does not record Jesus saying anything. He just got up and went. He went with no questions asked, apparently. But when he's getting close to the house, a second delegation. Now, this one indicates that this second delegation was friends, probably was not the Jewish community leaders that he sent before. These were perhaps some of his associates. It may have been some of the men that was under his command. We don't know. But anyway, he sent these friends, and with a new message says, don't trouble yourself. And I said, Lord, don't trouble yourself. The word here, Lord, is not the small caps, so it's not Yahweh, Lord. It's like me saying, sir. And it says, sir, don't trouble yourself. Don't be an inconvenience, since I am not, and verses 6 and 7 are quite remarkable. It says, I am not worthy to have you come under my roof. And verse 7, and that's the reason that he first sent these people to see Jesus, because he did not feel worthy to come to, I did not feel worthy to come to you. What a remarkable statement on the basis of this centurion. He did not, at this point, he's not a follower of Jesus, but he saw Jesus, he recognized Jesus as a person who had authority, and he did not feel worthy to come to Jesus. What a contrast this of this is to the Jewish leaders, that the Pharisees and all. Did they ever feel unworthy in the presence of Jesus? No, absolutely not. In fact, Jesus would often call them hypocrites, because they would come to him so blatantly trying to put him down. They had no respect for Jesus and who he was. This centurion, an outsider, he recognized the authority of Jesus. So important for us today to recognize the authority Jesus had. I think sometimes we get almost too familiar with Jesus in our lives, and we take him for granted and do not really bow to his authority. Now, the word for worthy here in verse 4, or verse 4 is different, or verse 6 is different from the one that was used in verse 4, where the Jewish people said he is worthy. The worthy in verse 4 is saying is having weight or value, which is focused more on the merit, how deserving this person was for Jesus' attention. Here in verse 6, it's more in terms of a sufficient in ability. So the centurion is likely saying something to the effect, I am not important enough to have you enter my house. He is demonstrating a mark of humility, rather than saying this is the weight that I carry. He's saying I have insufficient ability. The word for worthy in verse 6 is the same word that John the Baptist used over when Jesus comes to him and he says, I'm not worthy to unbuckle Jesus' sandals. So a wonderful indication of his humility. Humility is a word, is a concept, I think, again, that we sometimes don't fully understand, do not fully appreciate. Humility is recognizing how big God is and how small we are. Verse 7, he says, that's why I didn't consider come to you. Again, it's showing this humble spirit. Then verse 7, he goes on and says, but say the word, and my servant will be healed. What a demonstration of faith. This man of no faith is saying, I have so much faith in you, I have so much recognition of your authority that you don't have to come and lay your hand on my servant. You don't have to come and say any special words. All you have to do is just say the word. You just say the word, and my servant will be healed. And this, perhaps is an illustration of his military background. He goes on in verse 8 saying that, he's a person in authority. If he says something, people will do it. The men under his command will do it without asking questions. And, it really reminded me of the military train when I was in the military. One of the main things you learn from basic training in the military is to obey. Not to ask questions. You do what they tell you to do and don't ask why. And once you get that, then a leader then can follow. The men will follow them into battle and to do anything. So this is what this centurion was familiar with. He was familiar with people under his command to simply do what he told them to do without any questions. And that's I think perhaps too often, we're under the command of Jesus. How often do we ask questions rather than just doing what he's telling us to do? On page 110, I thought it was kind of amusing illustration that the writer talks about, as a father, let's see, I'm on wrong, no, I was on the wrong page. I'm sorry, page 108. He talks about going to a Dallas football game and having access to that. And when he bought some real cheap seats, and a friend of his was able to get him into one of the box seats. And he says that as this person told him the story, access reminded him of the access that we get through Jesus. He has only all authority. The only thing he has to say is, this one's with me. I wonder how many times we sit in the cheap seats of life, ignoring God's invitation to a life of spiritual amazement and joy. That really kind of struck me. It'd be like going to Dallas football game and Jerry Jones inviting you up to his special area, but then this is the invitation we have from Jesus all the time. We have a greater invitation to come out of these cheap seats of life and go up and be with Jesus. So anyway, I just thought that was very interesting. Then on the next page, 109, toward the end, it says, as a side note, I wonder how our prayers would change if we had faith enough to believe deeply that all Jesus has to do is just say the word. Again, I think we probably do not really appreciate the power and authority of Jesus in our lives. Verse 9 then is really kind of the heart of the lesson. Jesus heard this. These people came back, the second group that the centurion had sent this message, he heard this and was amazed at him. And turning to the crowd following him, he said, I tell you, I have not found so great a faith even in Israel. When those had been sent, returned to the house, they found the servant in good health. Well, Jesus heard this. He was responding to this intercession of the others that came to him. He turns to the crowd. Now, who's this following him? I suspect it's a leftover group from perhaps that he was teaching at the Sermon on the Mount. There was a crowd following him, and he was amazed at what he had heard. Now, there's other folks that have been amazed. Over in Luke 2:18, you see the shepherds were amazed when the angels came to them telling them about the birth of Jesus. Luke 2:33, the response to Simeon's word. You remember in the temple yard that were amazed at Jesus. Chapter 8, verse 25, the disciples were amazed when Jesus calmed the wind and the waters. They were amazed that he had this power. Chapter 20, verses 19, the religious leaders in response to Jesus' answers, he was able to answer them, and they were amazed at that. Chapter 24, verse 41, followers at seeing the resurrected Lord was amazed. You know, I think that I think there's a lot of amazements. Anytime we see God working in our lives, that's our response. We should be amazed, not surprised, but we should always be amazed at what he can do. There's two occasions that Jesus used the word where he was amazed. One at the belief when he was at the unbelief when he encountered a synagogue in his hometown of Nazareth, and then here where he was in reference to the faith of the centurion. So when Jesus heard that the crowd was following him, he says, I have not found so great a faith even in Israel. He did not praise the man for the kind and generous things he had done, as reported by the elders. He did not call attention to his gracious attitude and splendid character. What did he do? He directed his attention to the man's great faith. Faith is a belief with a predominant disposition to trust. And 2 weeks ago we talked about faith. It says if you have a faith of a mustard seed, you can move mountains. Here is talking about this quantitative, talking about the vastness of this man's faith, that it was very great. Now, it's very curious to me, again, this was, for all indications, this centurion was not a follower. He was not a disciple, but yet he expressed that faith even in Jesus' absence. He saw what Jesus could do. Was it faith in Jesus' ability to heal? So the nature of the man's faith, was it a faith that in Jesus' ability to heal even at a distance? Or was it a faith that had more meaning, a deeper meaning of whom the centurion understood? I think it was a very deep type of faith that he saw. He recognized the authority of Jesus, and that's the real point of that. Now, verse 10 is when those who had been sent returned to the house, they found the servant in good health. Over in Matthew chapter 13 of the account of this story, it says that at the very hour that Jesus said that the person would be, that responded to the centurion, that the person was healed. And I really think there was a time factor there that was involved. The healing took. The interest, a very important point is that the healing took place without Jesus being present. He didn't have to go and proclaim. He didn't have to lay his hand on this servant. He just proclaimed it, and the man was healed. And you know, Jesus still heals in that way today. On page 111, I like that in the middle of that column. It says, a yielding faith isn't waiting for a perfect environment or situation. Our yielding faith is a ready faith that withstands the tempests and the storms of a chaotic season. You know, our faith has to be there in calm times. If we have it there, then it should go on into the chaotic times. And so that yielding faith, we don't have to say, well, my faith will be increased when everything's going good for me. I think in my life, and as I've heard testimony of others, many times faith really dramatically increases during the difficult times when you really feel and need God's presence in your life. So in this session, faith is defined as a belief with a predominant disposition of trust. That is, faith comes from trust, is tied to trust. We have the two cannot be separated, faith and trust. So what is the object of our faith? The object of our faith is God, or is Jesus. How trustworthy is that object? Obviously, it is incredibly trustworthy. So we can have trust in other things, but they'll eventually let us down. We need to realize that We need to believe and trust in someone that is worth more than anything. And when we put our faith in Jesus, we know that He will never fail. So yield to Him by yielding your faith in Him. We yield our faith to Him, we trust in Him, and that faith then increases. What a beautiful story. Last week we talked, or 2 weeks ago, we talked about the size of faith. Here we seeing faith being demonstrated by a full trust, and it did not require any preconditions. Next week we will go into another expectant faith, and be from chapter 8 of Luke. So I hope you'll join us then. If you can, please join us on Sunday. Let me close us in prayer. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for who you are. We thank you for this lesson, the wonderful example, this centurion that did not go through the regular type of training to come to a trust and faith in you that was beyond those that were even close to Jesus. Lord, I pray that we will have that same type of trust in you, that we don't require anything in substance, that we just simply have a faith in you and trust in you, and that we know that when we do that, you will take care of all things in our lives. Lord, be with us this week. May everything we do bring honor and glory to you. We ask these things in your name. Amen.